It's working. Two angles. And we're live. It's live streaming now. No. School. Whoops. Sorry.
Must be morning already.
Okay, question time now. Is that on? Can you hear me? And hopefully everybody in screen one can see us and hear us. Okay, hello screen one. So we will be taking questions from screen one as well. So I'm going to ask Anthony a couple of questions, and then hopefully you've got a lot of other questions. I'm sure you have after that. I'm sure you have. So I'm going to start where it all started, really, which is obviously this is based on your book, which was obviously came out in 1985. At what point did you where did the book come from in the first place?
Well, the book came out of the collection of photographs that we found because after my mum died, my late wife, Susanna, went into the attic and found this huge, vast stash of material. And we dragged it all out because we realized instantly that it had some importance, and it also was extraordinarily valuable and interesting stuff. And we spent about 2 years getting it out and classifying it, filing it, making it retrievable, looking at what we got. And then some people from the publishers, Thames and Hudson, became interested, and they visited and they saw the material. And suddenly things started to get a bit real because they suggested we wanted to make a book out of this. And, you know, when a publisher like Thames and Hudson comes along and makes that kind of suggestion, you don't say go away. And so my father and I, we prospected various women authors. We went to the most sort of renowned people at that time and said, how about writing a book about Lee Miller? And they got very, very interested. And it came down to about 2 of them. And we were having this meeting in London with the publishers, Thomas Neurath, Thames and Hudson, and Nikos Stangos, and my father and me, as to which one to choose. And we were debating this very earnestly. And I sat there and I suddenly heard my own voice say, I want to do it. And there was a sort of stunned silence. And Nikos turned to me and he said, that's an interesting idea. Give me a specimen chapter and an outline by the end of next week. And so I went home and I was stunned. And by the absolute sort of amazing quirk of fate, David Sherman was visiting, and he remained close friends with my dad, and he was visiting home. And I said to him, I don't know what I've done, but how on earth can I write this? At this point, my previous experience as an author was being the overseas correspondent for Farmers Weekly. And so Sherman said, that's all right, my boy, you can do it. And he said, call it The Lives of Lee Miller. The plurality suits her well. And so I gave Nikos his outline and his specimen chapter, and they gave me the commission for writing the book. And it had a really generous advance, £8,000. That was a very lot of money in those days. It's far more than anybody can expect as an advance today. And that enabled me to go traveling. I went to the United States. I went all over Europe, and I met people who knew Lee, and I interviewed them, and I got masses of material. And then I came home and I wrote the book. And every time I finished a chapter, I sent it to Sherman by post. We didn't have email in those days. He sent it back by return of post with marginalia notes all over it. And little by little, we put it together. And it came out in 1985. And that was the beginning of the movies.
Oh, that's amazing that you did all the traveling and his involvement in it as well. So then at what point does it start to think there's a movie there?
Well, I guess it was the late 80s. There was an event in Los Angeles about the book and everything. So I went there, and I got approached by a guy who was a film producer from Columbia. And he sort of said lots of nice things and so on, and very flattering. And I thought, God, I don't know how to handle this, because it's all so weird. The sort of, I'd never expected to be in this position. And I came home, and luckily, another wonderful quirk of fate, Bob Hoskins, the actor, had moved to Chiddingly, and we'd become friendly with him. And I said to him, Bob, what do I do? I don't understand any of this. And he said, he gave me a phone number, and he said, go and see this lady. And the lady's name was Jenny Casarotto. She was one of the top agents at that time for actors and film writers and so on. And I would have never have got anywhere near her if it hadn't been the introduction of Bob. So along I went, and Jenny took me on. And she was fantastic, because that was the first of 5 production deals that we had. Columbia fell on its face before it even started. Then we had a bunch of guys called Wales Pitka. They got as far as the screenplay. It was not very good. I was glad that option didn't go. Then we got on with Nicole Kidman and David Hare got together to write to do the movie, with Nicole starring, David writing the screenplay. David wrote a very, very good screenplay, but it wasn't really about Lee. And then that fell apart because Nicole Kidman fell out with Tom Cruise, and our production is in Tom Cruise's company, and of course it never saw the light of day again. And then it was taken on by a lovely woman called Norma Heyman in London. And she commissioned John Maybury to write another screenplay, and he wrote again a very good screenplay, but it just wasn't about Lee. It was about an exciting person, but it wasn't Lee Miller. And then finally, at the last minute, that one crashed in the heap, and I was getting a bit despondent. It was also getting dangerous, because at this point, other people had written about Lee Miller, and it was entirely possible that somebody could have picked up their work and made their own movie from it, and I would have been elbowed out. And at that moment, Jenny put me together with an Australian guy called Troy Lum. And the minute I saw Troy, I liked him, because he was straight up. He's a little roly-poly guy. He was Fijian Australian. And I met him for the first time in Jenny's office, and he was just wearing a t-shirt and jeans with his cell phone stuck in the back pocket, and so unpretentious, so honest, so normal, so fantastically straight up to talk to. And he took it. He came to Farley's, he did a lot of research, and one day he came and he said, I can't stay long. I'm going to have dinner with Kate Winslet. And I said, isn't that sort of the thing? Isn't that the sort of thing you guys always do? And he said, no, this is really interesting. She met me at the International Film Festival in Toronto, and she said she wanted to be Lee Miller. And he said, I wasn't going to argue with that. And anyway, Kate came on board, and then things really started to happen. But that was actually just over 9 years ago. It was 2015. And it's taken this long to get this screen full of those images.
It does feel like Kate's involvement somehow made it happen in the end. It feels like she had a real passion for it, and that maybe is what, you know, how we can see that on the screen, but that felt like maybe her involvement really got it to the end.
Exactly. It would never have happened without her. And she did have this absolutely burning passion to tell Lee's story right from the beginning. Somebody had given her a copy of the book, and she had various kind of other associations with Lee. And so when she heard the rights were up, that's why she jumped Troy, and it just moved on from there. And when she got going, she hired Marion Hume as our principal screenwriter. Marion had never written a screenplay in her life. This is where Kate is so amazingly great, because she will take risks on people. So she hired Marion. Marion had been an editor for Vogue. She was a fashion historian, and she wrote a screenplay that was way too long. So along comes Liz Hannah and shortens it up. And Liz put in the device of having the young journalist in the story and telling the story through that. And then there were a few other nips and tucks, and finally we had a screenplay that we were all really happy with. And then she started to cast it. And that was another story, because she found Andy Samberg. Jude Law was originally going to be Roland Penrose, but actually he went off and did something else. And so she put Alexander Skarsgård in there. And I think the casting, I don't know about how you felt about it all, but I thought the casting was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It was. Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, Audrey Withers, my God, she was perfect, wasn't she? Absolutely perfect. I loved her. And she is so much as I remember her too, you know. But Sherman, my God, when I see him, he is so Sherman. It's just like the real thing, you know.
So how much involvement on the creative side, or, you know, obviously this is a Sky film. You imagine them having all the control. How much say did you have?
It was very, very adroitly done, because Kate kept control of the whole thing, and Sky came on. They were producers, but they didn't have any artistic control at all. And actually, it was a very good stroke of business that they came on, because you probably notice that this movie has had the most amazing publicity, and that is largely thanks to Sky, because they have this immense kind of publicity machine, and it's just got to work on this, and it's unbelievable what they've cranked out. But it's still an independent film. It's still controlled by the principal producers, who are Kate Solomon and Kate Winslet. And that is, I think, part of the reason it has such integrity. No studios got in there and mucked about with it and made it kind of like their brand. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one last question, because I think maybe other people might want to ask some questions. I was just going to ask, what do you think Lee would have thought about it?
I keep expecting a big hand to come out of the sky and clout me around the ear. You got that wrong. It should have been like this. But actually, I think she would have had a laugh. She would have really loved it. Do you know, the funny thing is that I often feel that she's been part of this process, because it's like when we got the first screenplays in, she sort of took one look at them and said, nah, can do better than that. And so the option fails. I mean, she's pulled the lever, you know. it's kind of like there's an unseen control going on here, so that we finally got the right producers, we got the right actress as Lee, we got the right screenplay, and well, that's from my opinion.
Yeah, it certainly feels. It does
yeah.
feel like that. It certainly does. So I'm going to come out and see if anybody wants to ask any questions. I may repeat your question back so that everybody in screen one can hear. So has anybody got any questions? If I can see, can't see. Are there any hands?
It's a bit dazzly.
It is a bit dazzly.
Oh, there's a lady right
there's a
here.
question. Yeah, do you want to take the mic up?
Story changed a little bit in terms of discovery of the negatives which were found by Susanna. How did you feel about that?
The story changed a bit from the original way in which Susanna discovered the negatives. How do I feel about that? It would have been lovely to have had Susanna in the film, and in fact, one iteration of the screenplay did have her in there. But what was felt was that it was when on that iteration there were just too many characters in the movie, and so unfortunately she got squeezed out, and we did it in the way that you've seen. And yes, for me it is a regret that she didn't get the credit that I would have liked her to have done on this, because it was she who discovered the negatives originally. But at the same time, what it also did was create a vehicle in which the relationship between Lee and me could be made obvious. You know, the tension between us, and I hope that came across. And so, yeah, you lose one thing, but you gain others. It's always a difficult decision.
Yeah. Are there any more questions? No. Have we got any from screen one? Yes.
Oh.
So this is from Rick.
Right. Sorry. This is from Rick in screen one. Hello, Rick. How did they arrive at the concept of the way the story was told? I guess that's kind of using with you as the character.
The original screenplay was very linear. You know, it was a sort of biopic type of style. We went from one event to another event in a consecutive order, linear sequential order. What was felt then was that we were missing a trick, in that we needed to be much more fluid so that we could retain the storyline, which is really about this woman who is driven by passion to go and discover what is happening, to do her bit to defeat Hitler, and to tell the world about what is happening in Europe. And that is the storyline that we really wanted, rather than a sort of more pedantic, more true story that would have been an exposition of her life. And so that was one of the reasons why they put in the kind of mediator of Josh O'Connor, and that enables us to go from one event to another and back again, and go very much more fluidly through the material. And then, of course, it also enabled them to introduce the fact that I personally had a very, very difficult relationship with my mum. She was actually, in the years that I knew her, she was an alcoholic. And some of you may know that growing up with an alcoholic is a very, very difficult process, because you never meet the same person twice. You know, they can be wonderful and charming and lovely and warm. One drink too many, bang, it's monster time. And that's exactly how it was with her. And I'm hoping that we managed to put that in to this movie, to make that tension between her and me. And also that tension did not resolve itself until really the last couple of years of her life, when we made friends. But I did not know her, I did not find her, I did not understand her until I explored the photographs, wrote her biography, and discovered this completely different person to the one I'd known.
Yeah, amazing. This is from Gail. With Lee's wealth of experience in front of and behind the camera, what do you think she would have done if there was no war? It's a good question.
Actually, that is a very, very interesting question. I mean, the war in many ways was her finest hour. Would she have gone on being a fashion photographer? Because that is what she was. Would she have gone on being a surrealist photographer? Do you know, Gail? It's such a good question. I don't really have an answer. But what the clue may lie in what she did later in life, because I think her finest ever achievement in her whole life was self-recovery from depression and alcohol abuse. And she did this. She just clawed her way up out of that and reinvented herself as a celebrity chef and got written up in Vogue and House and Garden and all kinds of posh magazines. And I think she might have just got there a bit earlier if she hadn't been a war correspondent before. So yeah, I think she would have probably found cooking a lot earlier.
Ah, that's brilliant. We may do a cooking event at the restaurant based on her recipes. So look out for that.
Yeah, well, Lee's granddaughter, my eldest daughter, she wrote the Lee Miller cookbook, which is like about that thick. Full of very good recipes.
Yeah, we're talking to her at the moment, so yeah. we may have a little special event too. Has anybody else got any questions?
Hello, Sue.
Yeah. Hi. When the film goes abroad to places like Germany, for example, or France, will it always be shown in the original language, or it's not going to be dubbed over?
It is going to be dubbed. In some, it depends on the distribution pattern in those countries. Where there's going to be lots and lots and lots of films go out, they're going to be dubbed. Where there's fewer copies, it'll be subtitles.
So, because for example, in Germany, sometimes they'll have the original version and a dub version. So
yeah, this is what they're doing in Germany and in France and in Spain. It's going to be terribly confusing.
Okay, just wondered.
When it went out in Munich, Munich Film Festival a few months ago, Kate was there to introduce it, and it got a standing ovation. And people stood up and roared and yelled, and they wouldn't shut up and sit down so that people could get on with the Q&A. And I mean, it's extraordinary, that result, because the Germans have a far greater understanding of European history than practically anybody else apart from us and the French. And so it was a wonderful kind of reconciliation, if you like, a moment of kind of understanding that they loved this film and they were so enthusiastic about it.
What about the States? Obviously, she was American.
Yeah.
Is she well known?
It's very interesting. We've had a very good reception in the United States and in Canada. We've run it in Los Angeles and in Toronto. And it's interesting because the audience tends to be younger and they don't really understand the nuance and the subtlety that we're putting over in Lee. And also, the war was never fought on their territory. Yes, of course, hundreds of thousands of Americans and Canadians fought shoulder to shoulder with us, but it wasn't the same kind of experience as having your cities reduced to rubble and all of the things that we know of as the post-war generation. So, yeah, it's doing. I think it's going to do its best business in Europe, actually.
Yeah. And was your dad involved in the book? Obviously, he was still alive.
My dear old dad, he died about chapter 6. But he was fascinated by it. And when I would come home from my research trips, I would tell him about all the stuff. He did not know that Lee Miller had been raped at the age of 7 because she hadn't told him. He did not know half the stuff she'd done in Europe because she hadn't told him. She didn't want him to be worried about her. And so I'd come home and I'd tell him about these things. And I remember one occasion, he got quite emotional. And he said, I wish we'd known. If we'd only known, we could have understood her better and done more for her. And of course, that was, a profound regret for both of us.
Of course. Are there any more questions?
I have a question, actually. In the corner, Kevin here.
It's Kevin.
Fairly light question. Is there any chance that Lee came to the cinema in Uckfield, do you think?
I think it's highly likely that she did. Yes, I know that we went as a family to the two that were in Lewis, and I don't have a specific memory of coming to Uckfield, but I'm pretty sure she did because she was an ardent film goer, and it would have depended on what you were showing at the time. But
I was simply
Actually,
curious.
yes. Do you know what? We came here to see Tale of Two Cities.
Oh, what
Yeah.
the Fancy Pants? What's his name? Dirk Bogarde. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a whole guillotine sequence that was
Yeah, horrible.
particularly horrible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we saw that here. I remember that. Yeah, I do.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
That's
there
really
you
good to
go.
know.
Come and see it next week.
Has anybody else got any more questions?
Right at the
See?
back there. Do
Oh.
you want
Was there something specific that triggered the softening in with your relationship with your mum?
Yes, there was. I had been overseas. I'd taken a Land Rover and a couple of chums, and we'd driven around the world. It took us 3.25 years. And when I came back, I was married to my young bride, Susanna, and we got home. And Susanna immediately, we moved into a lovely house on the farm, which was empty at the time, and we set up home there. And Lee was away. And when she came back, the first thing that Susanna did was to invite her to dinner. And I said, "What? You gone mad? That's the enemy, don't you know?" And she said, "She's not my enemy. And if you shut up long enough, you'll find she wants to be your friend." So I did as I was told. And Lee and I became friends. It wasn't like a mother and son relationship. We were like two battle-scarred warriors who realized we should have been fighting on the same side after all. And that was wonderful. We had just 2 years of that, and then she died of pancreatic cancer at Farley Farm. And but I am so glad that we had those 2 years.
Are there any more questions?
Sorry. I was wondering if there could be a film about Farley, surrealists. It sounds so.
Mike.
It just feels like it would be a great film after the war.
We're working on it. I don't know what will come of it, but yes, there's been a lot of interest, as you can imagine, been interest raised by this production, and so we'll see where we go with that. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions?
They can't hear you next door if you don't use the microphone.
Yeah, right into the mic.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering, and I've only seen the film. I haven't read your book yet. I will.
Thank you.
But I just wondered what your emotional response was when you went through the negatives for the first time. So being estranged from your mum emotionally, but then seeing kind of what she'd been through. I just wonder how that felt for you.
My first reaction was total disbelief. It was not the negatives that I saw to begin with. Susanna came out of the attic with some pages, closely typed pages on very thin paper, and it was a manuscript, and the pages were all jumbled up, and I started reading in the middle of one page, and the first lines I read were, "Machine gun fire belched from the end pillbox. The men fell flat and tried to find what cover they could among the shell holes." I thought, what is this? And I put the pages in what I thought was the right order, and I read it, and then I read it again, and I thought, this is amazing. There was no byline, no indication as to who'd written it. Then I went along to my dad and said, "What's this?" He said, "I think I know where that came from." And he went and found some back numbers of Vogue, and there among them was the copy with the Siege of San Malo report in it, which is actually what you see in the movie here. And it was banner headline, San Malo, the siege, the assault, from our own Vogue correspondent who was there throughout, Lee Miller. And I thought, my God, this is not the useless drunk I knew. There's something here that I'm completely missing. What the hell is going on? You know, it was a moment of complete kind of disbelief, belief, curiosity, in fact, it was a life-changing moment. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what it was. That was 47 years ago. It's taken us this long to get where we are today, and the efforts of a great many people too, other than me. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, Tony.
Hello.
This story is such a long time coming. It took such a long time for you to learn about, to write the book, and then for the film to be made. Has the story continued for you or changed at all?
The story really has a kind of rock solid armature of which is the truth. And then, of course, we make variations of that when we do a movie or whatever. But what changes in the story is often sometimes quite unexpected, in that I'm busy, doing something, and someone comes along and they have a new piece of research that clarifies a certain aspect that I haven't understood before. And so it doesn't so much change, it grows, and it grows and it grows. And this is absolutely quite wonderful. There's not many months that go by without somebody contributing something from somewhere in the world. And that's the rather wonderful thing about it, that it's continuously alive and being added to the whole time. There's no major changes, no radical changes, just lots and lots of details that are building up. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? No? Okay, well, we would like to thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you all of you here at the Picture House. It's been a pleasure to be
And
with you.
we'd also like to wish you happy birthday. It's Anthony's birthday today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And there are copies of the book downstairs, which maybe you'll sign.
This is a lovely bookend, actually, because exactly a year ago, last year, we were at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it was the very first public showing of Lee.
Wow.
So here we go. Toronto, Uckfield.
Uckfield,
Right.
yay.
Keep going up. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.